Okay, so I'm going to go over my theory of everything here. So this is kind of just the simplified version and the basic version. It still needs to be a little bit tweaked. I just wanted to put it out there for people to be able to kind of look at and then try to kind of take in the idea of what I actually am trying to explain behind, what I've gotten to so far. So what I've kind of gotten to here is more of the boundaries and being able to look at how everything either has to be or there's no possible way it could be. So the theory of everything, basically what we're going to be looking, anybody and everybody that's going to go over the theory of everything and find the theory of everything, the entire purpose and goal of it is so that there is nothing more that there is to know of or nothing less that we're ever going to know about. So, to know everything. So, we need to make sure we get to that range of being able to perceive, what it is that we are actually looking for. What's the meaning? How do we understand the meaning and the purpose? But that's a little bit contradictory to what I'm about to say, because the theory of everything that I kind of started to realize is it's not a matter of looking at how or why it is the way it is. That isn't necessarily the information we need, although any additional information on those levels is a bonus and beneficial and good to know of. It's not going to be our main focus, because there are other better focus points to be looking for. So what that means is we're going to be looking for, well, what is it, what it is, okay? And one other aspect of it. So what it is, and because we're not worried about how or why, because that's just too complex and we don't expect to be able to really understand the how or the why. But that would tend to be the more powerful understanding and side of things. So yeah, we're not worried about the how. We're not worried about the why. It is something we're going to keep on the back burner, because like I say, if you are able to find anything to fall under that, that's always a bonus, and we can use anything that we can. So yes, we're looking for the way it is. Okay, so we're only interested in what we know of it to be, in the way it is, in the way that it can't be. So that's kind of what we're most focused on. So when we only hone in on those aspects, we're going to be trying to pull that boundary of understanding, knowing everything, so that there's nothing more, nothing less to it. Now that we kind of know that we're not looking for the how did the universe get created, or the why did the universe get created, because that's kind of just like asking a person, you know, how did they. Let's use an example of how did they afford to buy a new car, and why did they want to buy a new car. See, understanding the how and why is kind of more relative to just knowing the inside details, which aren't necessarily anything that you can work with, because it's kind of invalid. It's just kind of null. So the how and the why, and then a lot of people, it does look like we're kind of looking for the how and the why, but that's why I'm putting in the theory of everything that, that's to be reconsidered into different, times of looking into that. There are different times of doing things. It's not necessarily the most important step or part of what we need to understand about it. So, the theory of everything, my theory of everything, the simple understanding of this theory of everything is kind of looking into the context of what it is that we need to know. What is it that we need to know? What it is that we can know? What it is that we can't know? So, the theory of everything. What it is that we can know. The things that I've found that what it is that we can know is I find the most powerful way of looking at the theory of everything is I think it goes down to a more basic way to look at it. More like is it a yes or no type thing? And that's a lot of how my videos are presented is real simple, and then it's just kind of just dual-sided on the yin and yang. So I think it's more important to get as close to that 50-50 point on that middle of the fence, so then you can actually start seeing the illusion behind the yin and yang of both sides, because now you can pick and pull from both sides because they kind of tie to each other and hold each other together. Because if we only want absolute truth, because that absolute truth is what's going to tie everything to hold itself together. So if any sort of 100% truth is all we're looking for to start tying it all together. So our theory of everything is going to be looking for everything that's 100% known of. If it's not 100% known of, it's not anything that's going to be able to basically make that fence longer. So what we're going to basically keep trying to do is put as many posts up in that fence of where it's perfectly balanced right in the middle of where it goes on that yin and yang of both sides of knowing something. So what we're saying is every time we find an aspect or a dynamic behind some sort of normality behind, the theory or what is known of or not known of, it's going to be like a new post in the fence that just ties all together to amplify and strengthen the theory as strong as possible. So one of the first posts that I kind of see to be that it must be 100%, and it falls on the one side or the other. Because like I say, all we need is absolute truth on either one side or the other, whether it is to be or not to be. And then that is something that we can anchor and start really getting a feel for the way that it actually is. The way that it actually is, or the way that we expect it to truly be. Because I have a lot of information that I could go over, but I kind of want to stay on point, particularly on just this. I don't want to go into side, explanations of things too much. So we're going to continue on just building the theory of everything here. So that's in my hypothesis and prelude to the introduction, kind of, and the introduction itself, what the theory of everything is all about. That's what the theory of everything is all about, is to tie it all together, whether or not it to be on one side or the other, just to strengthen the calibration and the observational dynamics behind what it is that it either must be or not be. So what I find to be really important for the theory of everything is that, okay, so the theory of everything, I kind of focus and perceive, because everybody has their own point of perspective where they're standing at their own level. Some tend to be at a lower or higher level, so we do take in the idea behind, the higher level a person's perspective are to be, the higher the ground, the more we expect them to see that horizon. And if we already expect the dynamic of the universe to be holographic, where you always see the same dynamic repeat itself over and over, we can kind of take into the an understanding of maybe what we're going to start to perceive is something very similar to something that has a vanishing point. The same as if you were to stand on the top of a tall skyscraper, as far as the eye can see. So we expect that the theory of everything is going to be limited and up to the uh, limit of as far as the mind can perceive. So we expect that there's a 50% chance that there will be that vanishing point to where it's as far as the mind can see. Once you've gotten up to that highest level to where you're looking out at everything and you're seeing everything and perceiving everything. So when you're standing up there and you're seeing everything, you're gonna eventually see a point where there is no way to see further than certain points. So we also need to take into consideration the theory of everything, that should be a strong dynamic of what we expect it that it could actually be. Meaning we may reach a point where there is no further way to actually perceive it, because it's limited to as far as the mind can perceive it, as far as it's actually goes out to. Because it's like, if you can't see any further than a specific point, nothing's ever going to change the fact that you want to see even further than that point. Because if you cannot, then you cannot. And we do expect that we are in that sort of normality. So I'm just saying, in the theory of everything, I think we should expect there to become a vanishing point to where there's really nothing else to it, and there's not anything else that you can really see beyond a certain point of whatever it is that we are to discover and really know about what it is we're looking at. So our goal of understanding the theory of everything is first to get up to that highest point of perspective, that highest level, and looking out at what is out there and the way it is, and what it is that needs to be understood and what it is that does not need to be understood. It's a biased opinion, I do find that I think a lot of people are trying to understand things that, don't even really need to be understood very much. I guess I can throw that in there, but so we really need to be a lot more careful in categorizing, what it is that we need and don't need. Okay, so what it is that we need out of the theory of everything is to get an absolute certainty on one side or the other. It doesn't matter. So one of our ways to get an absolute certainty is to find that midpoint of the way where the answer can only be. That's how we're going to solve the problem in understanding the theory of everything, is what it has to be. Okay, so what does it have to be? The theory of everything. Or what does it not have to be? A 50-50. You get right up to that 50-50 point. It either has to be or doesn't have to be that way. Because it's either on one side or the other. So what does it have to be or not have to be? That's your most powerful links in the chain to build the chain. And that's what you want to build your chain. What does it have to be? But don't just focus only on what does it have to be, because even understanding what can it not be? What is there 100% no way that it can't be? Alright, now I've been kind of repeating that, but I just want to really make sure everybody understands, to be able to make sense of how to really make it stronger. I think that if you kind of really understand that to a deep level, I think everyone can really start to get a stronger understanding of how to really build the chain the way it needs to be built and looked at. So now we kind of get a better, stronger feeling of how it needs to be looked at. Like I was saying, we're not interested very much as so much in the how or the why, because it's more of just the inside details that, it's kind of like the tickling. It's like, we're not just trying to tickle and play around with something. We're trying to, seize everything about it. Now, So what does it have to be or not have to be? So one of the things that I kind of realize that it either has to be or doesn't have to be is it either has to be that everything was always going to be able to have existed, or nothing was ever going to be able to have existed. It's either 50-50. So I think that's a very important link in the chain to put out there, and it's probably even one of the best starting links to start with, is that, it was always going to be possible for everything to exist, or, it was never going to be possible for everything to exist. So that kind of perspective, people don't look at. I haven't seen it so much, and I just kind of seen it to be so much more important to looking at it like that. And it's like, well, it should kind of be more looked at like this, because it kind of answers more questions to begin with. It's like, the way I see that people are perceiving things, it doesn't tend to answer enough questions to be like a very important way to look at it. It's like that's not the greatest way to look at it. I couldn't imagine it to be. So now that's one of our first links. One of our first links is has to always be possible or never be possible for everything to exist. Secondly, what is something that is 100% guarantee? So, has to be possible or never be possible for everything to exist. Okay. Okay, so also in the theory of everything, we're we're also coming to the theory that it either has to of came from a absolute point of nothingness or not. Alright, so that's a really good link in the chain here too that I find to when you want to really try to perceive the theory of everything. Has to have came from an absolute point of nothingness or not. So we are basically expecting it to be either A or B, that everything actually came from absolute nothingness or not. And that's kind of what the theory of everything is all about. So we're trying to really answer this question in itself, because we don't necessarily know which side or the other it actually is to be 100%. We kind of just can take our best guess at it. To my understandings that I know of, I have become aware that our existence, our universe, has to have come from an absolute point of nothingness. Now, the reason I think I can back up my answer to why I want to circle that as being the correct answer is because I write a lot of words of wisdom, and one of my words of wisdom in quotes go like this. It states everything is everything is actually nothing, because nothing has to actually be everything. So if that quote are to be correct, then that would also support the answer behind my theory that everything has to have came from an absolute point of nothingness, because it's our nature. So that's kind of ties into the whole thing of, like, if you start zooming into anything, like, let's say that you start zooming into, like, my computer desk right here. You hear that's a solid piece of wood. So let's say you just keep zooming in, zooming in, zooming in, zooming in. It's all, every time you keep zooming in further, further, you see how it all breaks down. It breaks down, it breaks down, and you see it's just particles, atoms, and electrons. And then, like I say, once you reach that point that you've gotten to the electrons, the atoms, you can always just keep going, zooming, zooming, zooming. And that's what the theory dictates, is that no matter what, if you just always keep zooming in into anything or everything, you will always come to that point of absolute nothingness. The answer lies within the words of wisdom of what I just said right before that, is everything is actually nothing, because nothing has to actually be everything. So the answer is nothing has to be everything. That's what we've also come to realize, is everyone's so perplexed. Oh my gosh, nothing is everything and everything is nothing. And then everyone is so confused with the duality behind it, and they don't understand the nature behind it, and then they automatically think that everything has to come from a point of somethingness, because their minds can't accept the illusion behind the dynamic of the way it is, because they didn't take that step back to look at the way it actually is. And that's the importance of looking at the way it actually is. Alright, so has to have came from the absolute point of nothingness or not. What else is something that it has to be or doesn't have to be for the theory of everything? Another good link for the theory of everything is that I think we really need to throw in there that we have come to the knowing of an absolute certainty that existence is only possible because everything basically had infinite amounts of energy that was always there. But this is just one of the two important links that are going to be added into this. So we do know with 100% certainty that there has to be, this is probably one of the most important building blocks of the theory of everything, is actually knowing that there has to be infinite amounts of energy. And everywhere we look with everything we've come to know of our existences, infinite energy exists anywhere and everywhere. So that is probably the number one link to the theory. Has to be infinite energy. So that's an important one because we know the answer for 100%. So we do know 100%, with 100% certainty, we can expect that if there were not to be that infinite energy that were to be there, that we should expect that nothing would ever be there. So it's either one way or the other. It's either always gonna be able to be there, it always has to be there, or it's never going to be there. And that's another one of my final links to the theory of everything, is that, okay, one second, the infinite energy, it always has to be there or doesn't. Okay. The fourth link is very similar to the third. One second. I'm literally coming out with the theory of everything off the top of my head because I just kind of was thinking about it, and then I had a eureka moment where I was like, okay, I have an idea of the way to explain it. So this will probably literally sum up my simplified version and basic version of the theory of everything. So the final link to the theory of everything is that we have to expect that space, everything always has to be there as a dynamic of nature and reality. So we basically come to the understanding of 100% certainty that there is that dynamic inside of a reality of something always having to be there and always being able to be there, and something that we know of to have always been there. So we know of that things are to have to have always been or not. Okay, so we do know, in one of our more important links, is that certain things are always going to have to be like a certain way or not. So a lot of people, when they see this link in the chain, it's really mind-boggling, because it's hard to really understand that dynamic behind that something can actually always be a certain way or always be there. So they kind of jump ship of even looking at it like that to begin with, and understanding the true reality that, oh, well, it's possible because we know of it to be like that, because that's what we've seen it to be. We've already seen that infinite energy had to have always been there. So if infinite energy always has to have been there, we already know that that dynamic of things always having to be there and always being able to be there is something that can be the way it is. So I believe right here is our main starting point of beginning, of solving and explaining and knowing everything about the theory of everything. I recorded this and I freestyled off the top of my head my theory of everything, and this is a simplified version. This is something that I could go back to later and add more, because like I say, I'm putting this out there for everybody, because this is for everybody, because anybody can just keep adding more links to the theory of everything here, and I just wanted to start it off to where it's really, in a way that makes sense, that's infallible, that cannot be refuted. You can't refute this normality of information, of the way it actually is and what we know of it to be. So this was recorded at 2 a.m. on March 1st, 2022.